Honda, the car company infamous for their delinquent ricer buyers. The car company that makes cars exclusively for old people. However you identify Honda, there's one thing about them that everybody can agree on. They used to be cool. Now notice how I said used to. Let me show you what I mean. How do we go from this to this? From this to this? And how do we go from this beautiful car to... I don't even need to explain that one. Today I'm going to answer that question and many more on this episode of Car Talk. Let's get into it. Unfortunately, it's no secret that by today's standards, Honda's a little lame. But what happened? They used to be so cool. Look at all these beautiful cars that they used to make. They were so cool, in fact, that their cars had key roles in movies. Well, we're going to look at these older cars and then compare them to the newer cars and then explain finally why exactly Honda's not cool anymore. Using my very simplified timeline, we can trace the beginning of Honda's coolness all the way back to 1988, the introduction of the B-Series engine. Now you're probably wondering what's so special about a little engine like the B-Series. Well, I'll let you know. It was the introduction of Honda's Halo technology at the time, VTEC. Yes, the B-Series was the introduction of VTEC. Now, you may be wondering what VTEC is exactly. VTEC stands for Variable Valve Timing and Electronic Lift Control. But in layman terms, it really is just a system that allows more air into your engine at a certain RPM, allowing you to make more power or have better fuel economy. But it's more than just about power and gas mileage. VTEC has a legitimate cult following. And here's why. When tweaked just right, you could squeeze so much power out of these little VTEC engines and so much sound. Take a listen at this. There's just something about that sound, that crossover, that just change in sound that people just really enjoy. Me, myself, too. Now, stock, these cars didn't really make that much power. Barely between 160 and like 200 horsepower. But what really brought these cars alive, like the Civic Type R, the Integra Type R, and the CRX SI, is the super light chassis. The CRX, for example, only weighed about 2,300 pounds. But listen, pair that with a 200 horsepower engine like the B18, that's basically a street legal go-kart. Another beloved characteristic of these old Hondas is their ability to rev super high. The B18 and the DC2 Integra Type R can rev out to 9,000 RPM. Stock. That sounds crazy. And that's because it is crazy. Go look at your car right now, check out the tachometer, and let me know what you see. Do you even see a 9 on your tachometer? I'll bet you don't. I'll bet you don't. I'm also willing to bet that your red line isn't even above 7,000 RPM. Anyways, these little engines were screamers. Everybody loved that about them. They also loved that the cars that came in were super light chassis. They also loved the amount of power that could actually go into it. People loved these engines so much that at the end of its 12-year lifespan, they were skeptical that they were going to mess up the next line of engine. But do you know what the next line of engines are? The K-Series. Side note, I left out the addition of the NA1 and NA2 NSX just because it's one of the best driver's cars known to man. It doesn't really need explaining as to why that car is great. Ask anybody what an NSX is, anybody into cars at least, and they'll know what it is. They won't even be thinking about the new one, they'll be thinking about the old one for sure. Anyways, let's move on to the K-Series engines. These lines of engines were introduced in the year 2000. And they're still running on to this day. That's over 2 decades. That's crazy for a line of engines to be running for this long. Thankfully, the B-Series elitists had nothing to worry about because these K-Series engines were high revving VTEC beast. The 2-liter K20 was the first K-Series engine introduced into the world, and my God, was it in almost every Honda car imaginable. K20 also has a ridiculous amount of variations, like way too many to explain. But to give you a gauge of what I mean by they're literally in almost every Honda car, the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and probably even the 11th have a K20 engine inside of it. In the later years of the K-Series lifespan, which we are living through right now, Honda went on and moved from the K20 being the default engine in almost all their cars to the K24, 2.4 liter in almost all their cars. Now, generally, larger displacement makes it a little bit harder for the car to rev higher, which is where the issues start to come in. To make things simpler, let's just say the K24 has like around 7,000 RPM rev limit, stock at least, as opposed to the 2007's Honda Civic Type R being able to rev out to 8,600 stock. Now, this by means isn't bad at all, but these cars are starting to lose one of the main characteristics of a Honda at this point: high revving. The VTEC is still there, but the high revving started to just go out the door. So I guess in a way the B-Series fanboys did have a reason to be worried. Around this time too, technologies in cars started becoming more common. We're talking about like power seats, power mirrors, power windows, things that would make the car heavier. So in turn, the car started becoming heavier with the same amount of horsepower, which means that they would become less nimble or light. Another characteristic of a Honda gone. Now at this point in time, the K24 has been pretty much phased out of their new cars and been replaced with the K20C engines. These engines are kind of anomalies. These are the turbocharged variants of the K20 engines, and they make some pretty good power. All of the turbocharged K20 variants make at least 250 horsepower, which for Hondas are pretty nice. The Civic Type R uses the K20C1 engine, and that makes 306 horsepower. That right there makes up for the heavy chassis. Now the car doesn't rev tie, 7K RPM rev limit, which is another characteristic of Honda gone, but still, it does feel light. I've driven the car. I can actually say for once that I've driven the car. The Civic Type R is a light feeling car, very nimble. Now the K20C engines in the TLX and the Honda Accord, on the other hand, those, they make enough power, but the cars are so heavy that it kind of cancels out. Kind of feel like you're going backwards just a bit. Now once again, these changes aren't bad at all. In fact, they're pretty necessary. You'll find that out later on. But they're just not what Honda usually does. Honda was more known to be the car company that would take a risk. Build that car because why not? In fact, here are a couple examples of Honda taking risk. We have the Acura Vigor with the G25A engine, an inline 5-cylinder. When is the last time you've seen Honda use a 5-cylinder engine? Never. This has literally been the only application for this. We have the Honda S2000 with the F20 and F22C engines, revved out to 9K and 8.2K. Beautiful cars, rev super high. VTEC, by the way, forgot to mention that. 3 characteristics of a Honda right there. The 4th and 5th gen Honda Prelude with the H series engines. Now those rev decently high, up to like 7.5K, but still, some classified as the hardest kicking VTEC engine that Honda's ever made. Honda used to be risk takers, so why don't they now? And you're probably just sitting there at your screen right now. Well, why don't they? Shouldn't they just take a risk? It's not as simple as that. Over the years, the EPA started to crack down on emission standards, and it proved that making a high revving engine just couldn't fit in those standards. We see the effects of this over time as the RPM limits started going down, and they started turbocharging their cars to make them more cleaner. There is one area though that the EPA has absolutely no effect over, and Honda has no excuse for lacking in these days, and that is the styling of their cars. One of the main things that gives a car its character that I forgot to mention somehow is its styling. Take a look at this picture of a new Civic Si. Did you catch what I did there? That wasn't even a picture of a new Civic Si. That was a picture of a Volkswagen Jetta. This is a picture of a new Civic Si. Can you see the issue here? Honda's starting to make cars that look like every other car on the road instead of the old days when their cars had character just by their styling alone. Now look at this picture of the new Integra. What is that? These days, Honda Acura is starting to blend their models together when it comes to styling. Front grille almost looks the same. What's going on is they're trying to do what every other company is doing right now, instead of sticking with what works with them. It's like manufacturers decided to move towards this societal standard of meshing all their cars together, having them lack character. Now, there's still companies that actually, have discernible differences between their models, but for the most part, Honda just happens to not be one of those companies. I will give Honda some props though. The styling on the 10th gen Civic, the 10th gen Accord, those are pretty nice. I like those. But just to point out what I mean by them meshing their models together, look at the Honda Insight. That screams Honda Accord. It looks just like an Accord. Just look at the past. They've done it before, they can do it again. Let's wrap things up. I may have been a little harsh saying that Honda's lame these days, but there's no denying that they're not up to the cool status that they used to be back in the day. The high revving engines, the crazy VTEC crossovers, and the unique styling. It's just not there anymore. Now, the majority of those things had to be canceled out just because of EPA restrictions, and Honda had to do what they had to do to survive in this climate. Sadly, I just don't think there's anything we could do to bring back the old days. But what Honda lacks in engine specs, they should be able to make up for in styling, which they have been lacking on. Here's what I say. Bring back unique styling, and Honda, you have yourself a golden ticket to success. People will ride that high from back in the old days. Your cars are not bad cars. Your engines are not bad engines. But your styling needs to be more unique. Needs to stand out from the other cars on the market these days, Honda. With all that said, I'm gonna go take a nap because it is 2 a.m. I need to sleep. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys later.